I woke up to the sound of a megaphone blaring outside my window. My first thought was that the world was ending. Maybe a tornado warning? A government evacuation? But no, as I groggily pulled back the curtains, I saw something infinitely worse. Karen, standing at the edge of my private lake, wearing an obnoxiously large sun hat, she grinned like she had just discovered America. And surrounding her was an entire army of people, coolers, fishing rods, lawn chairs, and a massive banner that read, "Welcome to the first annual Community Fishing Derby." For a solid 10 seconds I stood there, blinking. My brain refused to process what I was seeing. It had to be a dream, one of those weird ones where everything felt just a little too real. But then, as I heard the unmistakable splash of someone tossing a line into the water, my dream theory shattered. My private lake, the one I had spent years maintaining, the one I stocked with rare fish, was now the centerpiece of Karen's latest act of insanity. I stormed outside, shoving my feet into mismatched shoes, not even bothering with a shirt. The moment Karen spotted me, she waved like we were old friends. "Oh, good morning, Jake. You're just in time to see the first catch of the day." I stared at her, my mouth slightly open, trying to summon words that weren't just a long, guttural scream. "What the hell is happening?" Karen gave me a patronizing smile, the kind of smile a kindergarten teacher gives a slow child. "Oh, don't be such a grump. We're just having a little community event. It's good for morale, brings people together. And look," she gestured towards the lake, where a man was pulling a wriggling fish out of the water. "We've got some real whoppers in here." I looked closer, my blood turning to ice. That wasn't just any fish. That was one of my prized koi. A fish I had imported from Japan, worth more than Karen's entire SUV. And now, some guy in a cargo vest was gripping it like a cheap base, holding it up for his wife to take a picture. "Put that down," I said, my voice low. The guy blinked. "Huh. Put that down," I repeated. Karen let out an exaggerated laugh. "Oh, Jake, don't be so dramatic. It's just a fish. Besides, you don't own nature." I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth hurt. "Karen, this is private property." She gave me a slow, exaggerated blink, as if I had just spoken in an alien language. "Oh, come on. This lake has been here forever. It belongs to the community." "No. It belongs to me. I have the deed. I have the fences. I have the no trespassing signs." She waved a hand dismissively. "You're being so selfish. I mean, look around. People are having fun. Do you really want to be the guy who ruins everyone's day just because you want to sit inside and stare at your water?" I took a deep breath, willing myself not to explode. But then, as if to personally test my breaking point, a small kid walked by dragging another koi, completely out of the water, its vibrant colors now dull and lifeless. My koi. Dead. The fish I had spent years raising. I snapped. "All right, that's it. Everyone get out," I shouted, my voice echoing across the lake. No one moved. Instead, Karen put a hand on her hip. "Jake, don't be such a child. It's a public event now. I even got a food truck coming later." "Food truck?" As if on cue, I heard the distant hum of an approaching vehicle. I turned just in time to see a massive truck pulling up, its side painted with a cartoonish fish holding a fork and knife. "Fisherman's Feast. Fresh caught and fried." My eye twitched. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me." Karen beamed. "They're doing a special discount for the event. Isn't that thoughtful?" I looked at the truck. I looked at the people. I looked at Karen. And that's when I knew. Talking wasn't going to work. Logic wasn't going to work. Karen wasn't the kind of person who listened to reason. She thrived on pushing boundaries until people either gave up or went insane. I wasn't going to go insane. I was going to win. Turning on my heel, I walked back into my house. I heard Karen call after me, something about lightening up, but I didn't listen. My mind was already racing. By the time I stepped into my garage, a plan had already formed. A plan so devious, so beautifully simple, that I almost laughed out loud. Karen wanted a fishing derby? Fine. Let's see how she handled a fishing derby with no lake. I grabbed my toolbox and set to work, my hands moving with precision. I had installed a water drainage system years ago, a backup plan in case of flooding. It wasn't meant for something like this, but with a few modifications, it would do just fine. All night, I worked in secret, making sure everything was ready. By dawn, I stood by the edge of my property, looking at my masterpiece. The lake was gone. Where there had once been shimmering water, there was now only cracked earth and mud, the remains of fish carefully relocated to a safer location. The air was thick with the smell of damp soil and shattered dreams. And then, as if fate itself wanted to bless me with the best moment of my life, I heard the first scream. What the hell happened? I casually sipped my coffee as I stepped outside. Karen stood frozen at the edge of the barren lake, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Around her, people murmured in confusion, their fishing rods now completely useless. Karen spun to face me, her eyes wild. What did you do? I shrugged. Oh? You mean the lake? I guess nature works in mysterious ways. Her face turned beet red. You drained it. You maniac. I took another sip of coffee. Hey, Karen. She glared at me. You don't own nature. I had never seen someone go through all 5 stages of grief in under 10 seconds before, but Karen managed. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, all flashing across her face in rapid succession. And then, the real chaos began. People started yelling, demanding refunds. Someone accused Karen of running a scam. A man in an official-looking vest started asking about permit. The Fisherman's Feast food truck, now useless, revved its engine and backed out of the driveway, leaving a cloud of dust in its wake. Karen looked around, desperate for an escape, but there was none. She had built this whole event around my lake, and now, without it, all she had was an angry mob and a whole lot of explaining to do. I turned and walked back inside, whistling a tune. Revenge? It was a beautiful thing. The moment Karen's shriek echoed across my now waterless lakebed, I knew I had won. There was something profoundly satisfying about watching someone who had spent so much time steamrolling over people finally hit a wall she couldn't push past. Her arms flailed as she turned in a circle, her sun hat slipping sideways, her mouth opening and closing like a fish that had just been yanked from the water. The irony of that comparison wasn't lost on me. The crowd, which had gathered for what they thought would be a friendly fishing derby, was now a confused, angry mess. Parents pulled their kids away, muttering under their breath. Some people walked up to the edge of the cracked lakebed, as if expecting the water to magically reappear. Others demanded refunds from Karen, their voices rising in frustration. A man in a fishing vest pulled off his hat and scratched his head, looking around like he had just woken up in a different dimension. Karen spun to face me, her face an impressive shade of red. You did this. I took a slow sip of my coffee and shrugged. Did what? She stomped towards me, her sandals slapping against the dirt. Don't play dumb, Jake. You drained the lake. She flailed her hands toward the barren ground. You sabotaged the entire event. I nodded. Yeah, I did. For a moment, she looked genuinely taken aback, like she had expected me to deny it, to squirm under the weight of her accusation. But the truth was, I wasn't ashamed in the slightest. If anything, I was downright proud. She let out an incredulous laugh. Do you have any idea how much work I put into this event? I stared at her. Do you have any idea how much work I put into that lake? Her jaw tightened. You don't own nature. I raised an eyebrow and pointed at the now bone-dry lakebed. Well, nature seems to have taken my side. The crowd had begun to turn against her. At first, they had been confused. Now they were getting angry. A man with sunglasses and an expensive-looking watch crossed his arms. So, we all paid for a fishing derby and now there's no water? A woman in a wide-brimmed hat pointed at Karen. Are you going to refund us? Karen's eyes darted around, her usual confidence faltering for the first time. This isn't my fault. I didn't drain the lake. Jake did. The man with the watch turned to me. Did you drain it? I nodded. Sure did. Why? I sipped my coffee, letting the moment stretch just long enough for dramatic effect. Because it's my lake. Karen threw up her hands. Oh my God, you are the most selfish person I have ever met. This was supposed to be a community event. This was supposed to be fun. I gestured to the crowd. Are they having fun? Silence. Karen opened and closed her mouth, but no words came out. She knew she was losing control of the situation. The problem with Karen was that she had spent her entire life getting away with things because no one ever pushed back. She was used to bullying, manipulating, and making herself the victim whenever things didn't go her way. But this time, there was no way to spin it. She had set up an illegal event on private property. She had charged people money for something she didn't own. She had ignored every warning sign, every opportunity to back down. And now, she was standing in front of a furious crowd, with no lake, no fish, and no excuse good enough to save her. A man wearing an official-looking polo stepped forward, flipping through a clipboard. Ms. Karen, do you have a permit for this event? Karen's face turned as white as the fish truck that had so hastily driven away. I didn't think I needed one. I mean, it's just a little community gathering. The man shook his head. Hosting an event of this size, charging entry fees, and having food vendors on private property requires multiple permits. Did you speak to the county about this? Karen let out a nervous laugh. Well, no, but… And do you have permission from the property owner? He turned to look at me. Did you authorize this event, sir? I took another sip of coffee. Nope. The crowd erupted. Voices layered on top of each other, demanding explanations, refunds, answers. Karen's face twisted in desperation as she tried to shout over them, but it was no use. Then, as if karma hadn't already done enough work today, a local news van pulled up. A reporter stepped out, her eyes lighting up as she took in the scene. Karen saw the camera and immediately switched tactic. This is harassment. I'm being targeted. I was just trying to do something nice for the community, and this tyrant, ruined everything. She pointed at me. The reporter turned to me, microphone in hand. Sir, would you like to comment? I nodded, setting my coffee cup down on the porch railing. Sure. This is private property. Karen trespassed, drained my lake of fish, and held an illegal event without permission. I turned to Karen, tilting my head slightly. How much were you charging per entry again? Karen stammered. It wasn't about the money. Right. I nodded. Except it was. The reporter turned back to Karen. Is that true? Were you charging people for entry? Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. The crowd was still watching her, waiting for an answer. The official in the polo was making notes on his clipboard. The news camera was rolling. And then, as if her brain had finally accepted the reality of the situation, Karen did what Karen did best. She ran. Not a dignified exit. Not a simple retreat. She straight up turned on her heel and sprinted toward her car, nearly tripping over her own feet in the process. The news camera followed her, catching every humiliating second of her escape. The moment she peeled out of the parking lot, the crowd started to disperse. Some people were still grumbling about wasted money. Others just seemed happy to be part of the spectacle. The man with the clipboard handed me a card and told me to call if I wanted to press charges. I assured him I'd think about it. As the last of the cars disappeared, I stood on my porch, looking out at my empty lake. It would take some time to refill it, to bring back the fish I had hidden away. But that was fine, because for the first time in a long time, I felt an incredible sense of peace. Karen had finally lost. The days after the Great Lake disaster were some of the most peaceful I had experienced in years. There were no more random trespassers wandering into my property, No more kids yanking fish out of the water, and best of all, no more Karen. I hadn't seen her since she sprinted off after her public humiliation, which was honestly surprising. Karen wasn't the type to take a loss and disappear. She was more like a stubborn raccoon that kept coming back even after you locked the trash cans. Still, I wasn't about to complain. With the chaos finally over, I could focus on what mattered: restoring my lake. Thanks to the underground drainage system I had installed, refilling it wasn't as difficult as it might have seemed. I had already moved my fish to a safe location before pulling off my grand revenge, so it was just a matter of reversing the process. It took a couple of days, but soon the lake was back in its full, shimmering glory. The first morning I woke up to see the water rippling in the sunlight again, I let out a satisfied sigh. Everything was back to normal. No, scratch that, everything was better than normal. Karen had been exposed for the disaster she was, the entire neighborhood had turned on her, and I had secured my property from any future nonsense. Or so I thought. The trouble started with the gossip. I had made a point to avoid town for a while after the fiasco, but when I finally went to grab some supplies, I heard people whispering the moment I walked in. At first, I thought they were just talking about the whole drained lake incident, which was fair. It wasn't every day someone pulled off a revenge plan that dramatic. But the more I listened, the weirder the stories became. Some people were saying the lake had mysteriously vanished overnight and then miraculously reappeared. Others claimed it had been an act of revenge from the spirits of the land, punishing Karen for her greed. There were even a few folks who thought the government had gotten involved and done something with the water. The theories were ridiculous, but they all had one thing in common: no one seemed to believe that I had drained and refilled the lake myself. At first, I laughed it off. Let people believe whatever they wanted. If anything, it was funnier this way. But then, I heard the worst rumor of all. Karen had been telling people that I was part of some kind of secret cult. I nearly choked on my coffee when I overheard it at the hardware store. A couple of older men were chatting near the checkout, shaking their heads. Yeah, I heard it from Linda at the bakery. She says Karen swears Jake's been doing some kind of weird water magic, summoning the lake back and forth. His friend let out a low whistle. She says it was some kind of punishment, right? Like, he called on something dark to get back at her. They both turned their heads toward me at the same time, eyes squinting like they were trying to see if I had glowing symbols carved into my forehead. I sighed, paid for my things, and got out of there before they could start asking questions. I should have known Karen wouldn't just take her loss quietly. That night, as I sat on my porch, watching the moon reflect off the newly restored water, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and raised an eyebrow. Unknown number. I hesitated for a moment before answering. Yeah. A long silence stretched on the other end. Then, a familiar voice. You think you're so clever. I couldn't help but grin. Karen. To what do I owe the pleasure? You ruined my life, she hissed. I'd argue that you ruined your own life, I said. I just gave you the opportunity. You don't understand, she snapped. I had plans, Jake. That event was supposed to lead to bigger things. Sponsorships, recognition. I was going to use the money to fund my next project. And now? Now I'm a joke. People laugh at me in town. They call me the crazy lake lady. I leaned back in my chair, thoroughly enjoying every second of this conversation. Yeah, I heard some of the rumors. Very creative stuff. You know, I think my favorite one is the secret water magic cult theory. She let out a sharp breath. You think this is funny? I think it's hilarious. Silence. Then, in a tone that was quieter but far more unsettling, she muttered, I'll get you back for this. I sighed. Karen, I don't think you realize something. This isn't a battle you can win. You lost. The lake's back, you've been publicly humiliated, and everyone knows you were in the wrong. If you try anything else, it's only going to get worse for you. Another pause. Then, she laughed. It wasn't a good laugh. It was the kind of laugh someone makes when they've been pushed so far past reason that they've entered dangerous territory. "You really think this is over?" she whispered. "You haven't seen anything yet." The call disconnected. I stared at my phone for a moment before shaking my head. Karen never learned. I didn't lose sleep over it. Whatever she had planned, it wouldn't work. I had dealt with her nonsense before, and I would deal with it again if I had to. For now, I just enjoyed my peaceful lake, free from her chaos. Over the next few weeks, life returned to normal. The town mostly moved on, though every now and then, I'd catch someone looking at me like they were debating whether or not I actually had the power to control bodies of water. Karen, thankfully, seemed to keep her distance. No sudden pop-ups on my property, no surprise community events, no ridiculous announcements. But one day, as I was out on the water, casting a line just to enjoy the quiet, I noticed something strange. A sign had been planted at the far end of my property, just beyond the fence line. It was small, almost easy to miss, but as I got closer, I felt my stomach drop. The sign read, "Coming soon, Karen's Community Center." I stared at it. Then I laughed. She never learned. And I had a feeling I was going to have to teach her another lesson.